Now I will move a little bit the focus of the talk of today. This talk I will present to you some experimental results of astrophysical ices illuminated by ionizing radiation, such as X-rays and cosmic rays. Okay? And the implications on this research in astrobiology. The overview is, I will talk about the scenario, in astrophysical scenario, and then the similarities and difference between X-rays and cosmic rays. And I will move to X-rays and experiments with ions. Okay, as we know, there is a lot of radiation in space and also special environment in which molecules are very cold. And we call this as astrophysical ice. For example, this picture here represents the interior of a molecular cloud, very cold environment. In such place, the radiation illuminates molecules in frozen states and induce chemical reaction. Radiation such as cosmic rays and soft X-rays can penetrate inside this environment, in contrast with ultraviolet radiation that only illuminate the outer borders. These pictures represent the sources of X-rays and cosmic rays that are known: supernovae, pulsars, protostars, black holes, and AGNs. All of these. Now I will move to these slides just to show you some difference and similarity between what happens when those ionizing agents interact with matter. In the case of cosmic rays, a lot of energy is deposited in a small track during the target, inside the target, ionizing entirely the sample. And a lot of electron is produced. And after this, the electrons plays the roles and they place the chemistry inside the ice. In the case of X-rays and UV, there is a lot of production of electrons, but in the scale, you can see here that the damage is very diminished. Okay? In both cases, there is a plume that is produced and release molecules to gas phase as well. And reaction can occur inside the ices and also in the gas phase, in the high pressure gas phase just above the ice. Additionally, when X-rays illuminate a molecular cloud, the most energy is deposited on the outer part of the cloud, in contrast with the cosmic ray illumination that deposited most energy inside the cloud. We can make an association with these two kinds of oven, like a barbecue for the X-rays that can burn the meat from outside first, and like a microwave oven that can heat the potato inside first and then outside. You can have this in mind. So X-rays and cosmic rays can trigger different chemical reactions in different places in a molecular cloud. Okay? Okay. Now I will move to some experiment with X-rays. Basically, the experiment, we have a cryostat, a cold crystal in which we deposit molecules that can simulate the molecule that exists in space. And after this, we illuminate with X-rays and also with cosmic rays, analogs. And in those experiments, we monitorate the sample changes as a function of radiation dose from time to time using infrared spectroscopy. Okay? And we observe that we starting from simple compounds, and after irradiation, we have the enhancement in the complexity of the sample. Okay, some experiments were performed in Brazil using this machine in my institute, coupled to the synchrotron in Campinas city, close to São Paulo city. And this is the ultra-high vacuum chamber. This is the picture of the main chamber with the part that we deposit the sample. And here is the mount in the synchrotron. We move the chamber to the synchrotron and install it in this beam line. And I will present you some result of the experiment. These are still some pictures. And these two pictures here is sample preparation. We can see a needle here and a white ice covering the sample holder. And this is in a picture during the sample irradiation with X-rays. Okay, first result is the chemical enhancement during a simulation of Europa's ice, for example. We start with this composition: water, CO2, SO2, and little bit ammonia. And after the fluence of 10 to 18 X-rays, we produce a lot of compounds, and such as precursor of sulfuric acids and others. And from the evolution of the infrared bands, we can derive the cross-section for the destruction and for the production of the new species. And we can understand the chemical equilibrium that happens every time we illuminate those ices. So, from the evolution of the bands, we fit some function and we derive the cross-section of destruction and production. Okay. I move this. This is another experiment of destruction of amino acids by X-rays. We did similar methodology. And we start with 5 different samples, 3 amino acids and 2 nucleobases, illuminated by X-rays. And we saw, as a function of exposure time or fluence, that the amino acid is much more destroyed than nucleobase. So this helps us to understand why amino acid might be difficult to observe in space. And maybe nucleobase can be easier to be observed since they are more resistant. Another experiment with X-rays is the production of nucleobase adenine from a mixture of nitrogen and methane, in an attempt to simulate the aerosols in Titan or in the surface of Pluto moon. So we illuminate the sample for 3 days continuously, and after some time we observe this thing in the ice, the residue at room temperature, and the chromatography analysis shows the presence of adenine. So this is very nice to understand the presence of nucleobase in the space. Okay, now moving to some ion experiment. The methodology is quite similar, but the result I'll present you here was done in France at the GNU Ion Accelerator with my colleagues. This first experiment, we illuminate ammonia-containing ice, and we observe the destruction of the parental molecules, but there is some lines in the infrared that might be associated with glycine. So this is kind of a research that is driving us to the formation of complex molecules in radiolysis of ices. Another interesting experiment we got is the formation of unsaturated hydrocarbons during cosmic ray bombardment. We start with cyclohexane mixed ices, and after some time we saw that we produce unsaturation in the molecules. We produce double bonds and triple bonds, and we release molecular hydrogen to gas phase. This type of experiment shows us that cosmic rays induce the formation of double and triple bond in space, enhancing the complexity of samples. And there is other experiment investigating the destruction of amino acids in space. And in this type of experiment, we was able to understand which part of molecule is more sensitive to radiation during radiolysis. For example, monitoring different infrared bands, we can see different parts of molecules. And we observe that certain parts of molecules is much more sensitive to radiation than others. This is one interesting result that we can observe, that we can have from the experiments. Finally, I will present you this last experiment. We just start with the glycine in the ice phase at 14 Kelvin and a second experiment at 300 Kelvin, and we radiate it with cosmic rays. And what we observe in the end is glycine is destroyed, okay, but a fraction of the molecules are joined together to produce peptide bonds. So, again, the infrared spectrum as a function of fluency, so you start here, and as a function of fluency, we can see a destruction of some bands, but if you made a zoom in this part, this Gaussian in red represent the infrared bands of amide groups that is related with the formation of peptide bonds between glycine. So, cosmic rays can also produce peptide bonds if you have glycine in interstellar environment. To summary my short talk, X-ray and cosmic ray induce molecular chemistry enhancement in cold space environment, producing complex molecules. Electrons triggered by radiation play the most important role, but also radiation flux and ice temperatures play some roles. The concept of chemical equilibrium is important because after some time, every sample we illuminate from both using X-ray or cosmic rays reach a chemical equilibrium. This concept is quite nice. I would like to finish this talk with this cartoon that even we have the ingredients, the pen, the oven, and the clock to make a cake. This is kind of a metaphors in sense of producing. We need to know how to use this to produce a cake. It's not obvious that mixing all of these ingredients, we produce a cake. But in the term of life, the universe knows how to mix everything to produce life. But the big question is it by chance or using a recipe? And I'd like to thank you for your attention. And this is the picture of my group.